Welcome back. I have Gigi Michalak on the podcast today. We originally met, I think, in 2021 in a business program, and we've stayed connected since then. And I've watched her journey through Instagram and just the shifts in her business and the shifts, in you getting married and all types of things. Anyways, I just can't wait to introduce you to the podcast listeners. Can you tell me a little bit more about who you are?
Oh my gosh. I'm just so excited to be here, Steph. It's been, I feel like, a long time coming. And it's so nice to meet all of you who are listening today. My name is Gigi. I am a clinical nutritionist and I specialize in autoimmune inflammation. So I help women live more vibrant and fulfilling lives after being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And it started from my own experience with autoimmune disease. And that's kind of how I started. I went from sick to now serving women, which is just an honor. So
I love that. So much of what I do today, which you probably know, is because of all the struggles that I had. And It feels amazing to be able to, at least for me, to be able to say, oh, okay, that's at least part of why I went through all of that, because now perfectly equipped to help many, many women.
So true. I feel like I couldn't agree more with that statement. Having somebody in your corner that gets it because they've gone through it is a gift. And being able to give people, women especially, that gift, it's an honor for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So now I know for you, inner work, spirituality, and your autoimmune disorder are connected. Tell me what was life like before starting this inner work or personal development journey?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a good question. The best way that I could describe it, I'm going to describe it as this first, and then I'm going to dive into the details.
Okay.
I was diagnosed with scleroderma, which is a connective tissue autoimmune disease at 12 years old. So at 12 years old, especially as a young girl, we're going into puberty. Our identity is being formed. We're starting middle school. At least that was my case living in South Florida. Yeah. And so very early on, I started to experience the unfortunate impact of my illness becoming my identity. And it really became how I positioned myself in my world, where I was either at a disadvantage, I was broken, my genetics were off, I was the unlucky one. And as we all very well know, when it comes to personal development, when it comes to mindset, this victim mentality, even that we're going to use victim mentality, we're not going to shame it, we're just going to call it what it is. Right? It put me at a disadvantage in so many other areas in life, and that followed me for over a decade. And so that's really what my experience was before this healing journey, both on an emotional and physical level. I was a victim of my diagnosis, both in a spiritual, emotional, and physical capacity.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea that you were 12. And as I was listening to you, I was just picturing a 12-year-old girl getting this diagnosis. And it makes me teary-eyed because, of course, you said we're not going to shame victim mentality. Of course, you were like a baby. Of course, you went into that place.
Yeah.
Curious question. Did you have anybody that you could look up to, like, oh, they dealt with this and they get it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I actually kind of did the opposite. So two things come to mind.
Yeah.
One was my family dynamic. When I realized that I was sick, and this wasn't a flu, right? Because there's a point in time when you get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease where you're like, oh, wait, this is more serious, right? And naturally, as a child, even as an adult, we do this, especially as a child, we kind of watch our parents' reaction, engage, right?
Yep.
How serious is this?
Yeah.
And my parents were distraught.
Oh.
they were beside themselves. So
They were scared.
they were terrified.
Yeah.
When we look at different types of scleroderma, it's a really scary condition.
Yeah.
And I processed this in a way where I was like, how do I describe this? Okay, the way that I processed this was I am sick and that makes my parents sad. So if I pretend to be okay, that will make my parents happy.
Oh, yes.
And so I masked a lot of my anguish. I masked a lot of my pain. And even to this day, like I almost had to talk to my mom about this because she was like, Johnny, you just handled it so well. And I'm like, no, I didn't.
Oh, she didn't know.
My mom didn't know. And I think that that was truly because it's a beautiful thing because I think that it showcased the love that I have for my parents.
Yeah.
And I think that it shows a pattern, a mindset pattern of mine that I'm willing to sacrifice myself to the point of despair for the people that I love.
You were, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. Small note. Ironic. The episode coming out right before yours is about pretending and masking.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, oh, look at this. Beautiful. I mean, not, but it brings it to life.
It brings it to life, which is so important because so often when we feel like we're masking, we feel like we're hiding, and that hiding kind of feels like shameful. And like, there's usually a common narrative when it comes to masking symptoms. A lot of it can come with good intentions and it feels right, but it's not necessarily going to lead you to the true healing that can be within your reach.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, for those listening that are like, never heard of scleroderma, like, what is this? Can you just give us like a couple sentences?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So one, if you've never heard of scleroderma before, you're not alone. It's pretty rare. So that's okay. It is a connective tissue autoimmune disease. So the best way that I like to describe it is one, it's a cousin of lupus. So it's like lupus, but different, more of like a relative. Scleroderma literally means scarring of the skin, scarring of connective tissue. And the scarring can have a multitude of severities. So for me, a lot of my scarring happened on my connective tissue within the dermis. So that's like your skin tissue, right? This can lead to like hyperpigmented lesions that look like bruises. And it could be a very physical, like a physical outwardly, what's the word? Excuse me. You can observe it. Like you can see it on your skin.
Got it.
I was like, how do I describe this? And in other forms, that connective tissue scarring can be in your organs. And in those cases, you can actually pass away from the effects. So the severity of this condition can be devastating. And just like lupus, it could be devastating. Scleroderma can be devastating for a multitude of reasons. But that's just kind of more of a superficial idea of what this condition is and how severe it can get.
Yeah. Okay. Ignorant question. Connective tissue, is that muscle too?
Yeah. Great question.
Okay.
No, this is really good. So connective tissue lives all throughout the body.
Got it.
Within your skin, your muscles, your organs. It's really the webbing that allows it like holds your muscles together. Right. And so connective tissue is just kind of everywhere. It's one of the reasons why connective tissue autoimmune conditions can be so all consuming. Because pretty much anywhere can be affected. Exactly.
Wow. 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 Okay. Okay. So anything else about your journey before, whether it's masking or how you felt or how you viewed life, looked at the world, any of that you want to share?
Yeah, there was one other thing that, my goodness, that was very prevalent. Oh my gosh, I can't talk today. What is the word?
Human.
Prevalent. Yeah, prevalent. Thank you so much. Prevalent in the time of the early 2000s, which was kind of like this diet culture fad, right?
Yes.
And so often what I'm going to be sharing a lot on the other side of my healing journey is that like food can be medicine, right? But there was such a long time where I tried to utilize food as medicine in a really toxic way, and it didn't work. And so a lot of this came from looking at my body like a math equation and not like a woman, like a growing woman, especially during like my late teen, early young adult years, like 16 to 19.
Okay.
I was like counting calories and working out and measuring, okay, well, like this should be this and that way should be that way. And this is bad and this is good.
Yeah.
And that quickly drove my mind insane.
Yeah.
Because I was still getting sicker. I just had more stress on top of it because I was trying to measure and count and control things that were not actively helping me.
Yeah.
And so before we kind of talk about like healing and like mindset and how that really can transform our relationship with food and that can allow food to become medicine.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of paint the picture and say, hey, I've done this wrong before for many years. And unfortunately, when I say wrong, I mean almost like just not supportive, not effective. And a lot of that is still being marketed.
It is
pushed today like it's the brand new thing, and it's not. And so I'm excited to kind of share what that looks like on the other side as well.
Yeah. Okay. And so in that 16 to 19 range, even though you observed, oh, I'm getting sicker, the thought process was like, oh, I must still not be getting it quite right. Or were you kind of not even thinking about it like that?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. I think that response was a little bit more complex, and it would ebb and flow. The ebbs and flows would be extreme. And so the best way that I could describe it is that I would go from like numb to depressed.
Okay.
Numb to depressed. And that numb was more like that space where I could be like, okay, like I can push through, I can count and measure and cook and obsess. And then the depression was when I would like not be able to get out of bed because I was in a flare up and I was a victim of my illness. And so I was really kind of a slave to both.
In case others, and this is me, I don't totally know what a flare up is. What symptoms? I'm just curious now. Were you dealing with?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So when we're talking about autoimmune disease, when the term flare up means that there is a drastic increase or progression when it comes to symptoms. So this varies from person to person and diagnosis to diagnosis. Yeah. So for me, a lot of the times flare-ups would be muscle pain, joint pain, and then the scleroderma lesions would get bigger. So there was like a cosmetic, my body would cosmetically look different. And with these lesions, they looked like burn marks. So people would be like, what happened? And I'm like,
you okay?
Yes. Like in high school, people thought I was getting beaten home. And I'm like, no, just sick, And so not to be like the trauma jokes, but yeah, so it was just, that would ultimately happen. There would be more pain and then more progress. And then that would be the new standard until the next flare up. So there was fears of the next flare up. What is the flare up going to be like? And then once that flare up hit would be a depression because there would have to be this new level of acceptance for this new body that's just getting sicker and sicker. And now you have to adjust based on your capacity.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So tell me, was there a peak moment for you where everything shifted?
Yeah, there definitely was. So this was when I was 22. So 10 years after I've had this condition. And there's something about having an autoimmune disease for 10 years where you're like, I'm forgetting what it even feels like to be healthy.
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
And so during this time, I was going through a flare up, and now this new lesion started to affect my arms. So during this time, I got really, really good at fighting and dressing in the ways that I felt confident and really kind of hiding my lesions to the best of my ability. And that meant, so the fact that I had a new lesion on my arm meant that I no longer could dress the way that I wanted to feel confident. And it broke my soul.
Oh,
There was something about this flare up where I looked in the mirror and I no longer saw myself anymore. I felt like I was going to, just a trigger warning, want to make sure that everyone's like kind of prepared. I'm just being transparent.
yeah.
I looked in the mirror and I literally thought that I was just going to die from the medications that I was taking or the condition itself. I felt like I was on the road to death. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
And to kind of give you a picture of like the medications that I was taking, I was 22 years old taking like oral chemo, because that's often what's prescribed to women with autoimmune disease, especially with connective tissue. So I was 22 years old, working 2 jobs at the University of Florida, taking chemo, getting sicker, and I just found myself bankrupt on an emotional, physical, and spiritual level. And it brought me to my knees.
Yeah.
It brought me to my knees because it got to the point where I no longer saw a future. I'm like, if this is the rest of my life, like I no longer want it. Like I don't want to live this way.
Yeah.
And it was a heartbreaking moment. And that heartbreak led to me kind of just like crying out to God and being like, God, I don't even know if you're out there. I don't even know if you exist. You know, ring, ring, ring. Like if you're out there, please just give me a life worth fighting for, and I'll serve you for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Oh, I
And
got goosebumps.
it was truly a point of desperation in so many aspects. And in that moment, I felt this, what I could only describe as like a lift of like peace. And the peace was not my own because I've never experienced that in my life.
Yeah.
And that night I had my first tangible experience with God that night. And I had a vision, which was like vines and flowers and produce. And it was like colorful and beautiful. And it was like my frontal lobe was like not in the conversation, but my like spirit was locked in.
Yeah.
And it was like, I knew what I needed to do.
I have full body goosebumps, like all down my arms, all down my legs. Just wow.
It was such a life-changing moment. The craziest part, that day was the day my healing journey started. The craziest part is that I was not healed that day, but there was a miracle that day. And that miracle was that I believed that I could heal.
Yes.
My mindset changed.
Continual, just, I wish you could see them. My whole, like everywhere, goosebumps.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I don't share it. Like I don't share this often, but I should share it more because it's so profound.
Yes.
And that mindset shift, that belief is what ultimately carried me into a completely new life. That's ultimately why I deeply believe to the core of my being that mindset and belief are at the root of this. If you could be doing all the right things, but if you believe that your body is broken, if you feel like you're on the road to death, it doesn't matter what you do. Your brain is just going to be looking for death and despair.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. That was powerful. Talk to me about, okay, so what's next? That was the moment, but nothing physically had shifted.
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
Just my mind. And so the best way that I could describe it was like urgency. I was like, okay, if I could do this, like I got to do it now. Right. None of the pain went away. The flare up was still there. Yeah. I want to emphasize that the only thing that changed was my mind.
Yeah.
And it was almost like nothing could stop me. It was crazy. And so serendipitously, this is actually, you know what's crazy?
Yeah.
It's 11 years ago today.
Today.
That's actually crazy. I just looked at that.
Oh,
Isn't that
October
wild?
22nd.
Second.
Yeah.
I like celebrated it over the weekend. But anyway, I digress. So I had urgency. And at the time I was like, okay, well, I feel like my brain was just like looking for options.
Yeah.
But so often we're like, okay, well, which one's going to work?
Right.
Because you're like, okay, there's so many people just saying a bunch of stuff, but what's bogus and what's actually fact?
Right.
Right. And so I found myself serendipitously walking into like an herbal store.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like herbs, and I was honestly looking for a Himalayan salt lamp because I was like, okay, this is all that I could find. It's supposed to help with joint pain. So like, let's get it. It's cute and it's supposed to help. So I went in looking for a Himalayan salt lamp, and who I found inside that room ended up being the catalyst to believing that remission was possible. And she was really the first person to really show me what it looks like to fight for your health naturally.
Wow.
And her name was Otter. She was like as hippie as you could think. She was a cancer survivor. And the day that we met, she really spoke life into me in a beautiful way. She didn't necessarily like believe in the same things I did, but like she was such a huge part of my healing journey in a huge way. And we still stay in touch. She is such a powerful woman in so many ways. And she was ultimately that first person to say, hey, you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get you started on this path immediately. And so 3 days later, I actually have somebody in my corner helping me really getting this thing going when it comes to like herbs and superfoods and diet and breaking habits that were quite literally making me sicker, which was like self-medicating on like alcohol and smoking weed and things of that sort that are very common for college kids, but for me were toxic and lethal at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I think it's no coincidence that you walked into that shop and that she was there, and that I assume you chose to be open with her because you could have gone in, bought what you wanted to buy, and walked out.
Yeah, 100%. She asked me questions for sure. She had a sixth sense about her, which was like mind blowing in a multitude of ways. But ultimately, yeah, like I had to like accept her offer. I had to say yes. And I think about that often where it's like, sometimes we're like, okay, well, we want to feel better. But when we have the opportunity to really fight and put your sneaker to the pavement, like you're going to say yes and you're going to learn. And that's ultimately fighting for your life.
That is so good. So good. Because how many times has someone been in pain emotionally, physically, had an opportunity where it was like, oh yeah, this can help me, and they walk away.
They wait.
Yeah.
And the cost of waiting, and I've waited before.
Yeah.
And the cost of waiting can far exceed the cost of moving forward. Even if it doesn't work, that's the craziest part, which 9 times out of 10, it does.
Yeah.
Right. But the cost of waiting and not choosing to fight for your health on an emotional level does something to you, and you choose to stay.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, you can't force anyone to fight for their health. I firmly believe that you have to be ready. You can't, right? And it breaks my heart a little bit every time somebody does that, because what I know is that they're essentially choosing in that moment. They're like, I don't want to bet on myself. I actually don't believe in myself enough that I'm willing to stay in misery. And that is heartbreaking.
It is.
For sure.
I see it too. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Okay. What else do you want to share? I feel like we could be here for 2 hours.
I know. I feel like there's so many things that I want to be like, oh my gosh, like food is medicine. There's so many things, but
many.
there I'll share this because I know that I briefly shared about like what didn't work for me nutritionally and like the mindset behind that. And so something that Otter shared with me very early on was the impact of like adding in foods, right? And so just kind of painting this picture of where I was when I started, because so often when I share with people that I had like a tangible experience with God and it's like really like a spiritual thing, they think that's like, oh, you were like good at the beginning. And it's like, no.
No.
I still had crippling anxiety. I still had a horrible relationship with my body. I was still actively in pain. Truly, the only difference was that I had faith and I literally thought about my disease differently. I saw my body and my disease in a completely new light.
Yeah.
And so with that new perspective, I almost had this like a little bit more wisdom. And as I approached this new healing journey, I very much saw my past experiences with different restrictive diets and paleo and in the ANP diet and no carb, all these diets that I tried that didn't work and that led me to more anxiety than actually freedom. And I made a decision very early on that I was not going to neglect my emotional health for the sake of being physically healthier. And it was the smartest decision that I could have made early on in my healing journey.
Give me one example of what you mean there. Like paint that picture for listeners.
Yeah, so good. So when we are on this pursuit of physical health, this could be weight loss, reducing inflammation. It could be a fitness journey, right?
Yep.
Also, much of what this looks like when it comes to mainstream wellness is very physical, measuring, counting, discipline, willpower. What is not usually emphasized is, hey, how is your emotional health? Are you actually living life? 100%. Ever. The most miserable people that I know sometimes are the ones that can wake up at 5:00 in the morning and work out. Right? And don't get me wrong, we love a good workout routine. We're not shaming that.
No.
But is it actually a life-giving practice for you? And that's the difference.
Yes.
All because you're doing the checklist does not mean you become a happier human. And ultimately, when we're thinking about freedom, when we're thinking about health and vibrancy and a fulfilling life, your emotional health is what's going to allow that to happen.
Yes.
And so we both need to be considered. Now, when it comes to autoimmune disease, in my professional opinion, if you are looking to increase remission, it's a non-negotiable to consider both because autoimmune disease in 9 out of 10 cases is a stress-induced condition, which means that if you are going through stressful seasons, you will likely experience flare-ups or you increase your risk drastically for one. Which makes you feel like you're a victim of your condition because there are times where they're just simply out of your control. Right? And so often we neglect our emotional health on this pursuit. And I didn't have necessarily that clarity at the time, but what I did have was the wisdom. And I decided in that moment, and it has been something that I teach 10 years later, 11 years later now. And it is a game changer. The more that you find out how directly connected our brain health, our digestive health, and our inflammation are, it is a feedback loop to healing and restoration in the most magical and miraculous way. But so much of us don't tap into it. So
the vast majority of people. Wow.
And it's just not the shortcut option that's marketed often.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so good.
I'm so glad. This is so much fun. Just kind of highlighting this stuff because this is the secret sauce.
Yes.
It's like we're human. We're not math equations.
Right.
It's like the best news ever.
Right. Let's get the word out to more people.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
my goodness. Yes.
Exactly. So that's ultimately what led me to start adding in and
Mm-hmm.
like adding in nourishment and adding
Yeah.
in anti-inflammatory foods. And ultimately, yes, like there was elimination and things of that sort on my healing journey, but I did it with like an empowered decision.
Right.
It was never, I have to do this. It was like, no, okay, this doesn't serve me. And now I'm creating a boundary. And
Mm-hmm.
so something that I teach in my program is that like, hey, when we have a food, like a food intolerance,
Yeah.
we establish a boundary, just like someone who we need to establish a boundary in real life. So often we're like, bad or good? It's like, what if we just need a boundary there
Yes.
versus like black and white?
I love it. I talk about black and white and all or nothing all the time. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I
Mhm.
don't know. It's easy. Again, this is one of those things where it's easy to just be like bad or good. And
Yeah.
it's like satisfying to the mind when it comes to like simplicity. But once we
Mhm.
dive into the complexity of our emotions, it doesn't make sense.
No, no. And the mind, one of the things that it does automatically
Mhm.
is bucket it in good, bad, right, wrong, all or nothing.
Yeah.
However, we get to look at that and say, like, okay, do I have to buy into that? Do I have to believe that? Or is my mind just doing it because this is efficient and it's trying to be efficient, period?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
So
Okay.
good.
Anything else that's really important or that you want listeners to know about your healing journey?
Want to make sure that the first thing that came to mind is actually the thing that I should say. But ultimately, I want to encourage the person who has been trying for a really long time to support their health and they're not seeing the results that they want, whether that is weight loss isn't budging or their immune markers are still sky high or they're in pain. Your body was designed to heal. Your body has a mechanism that allows you to regulate inflammation, just like how you can better regulate emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Both are so possible and they are connected.
Mm.
So please know that there is hope. Where you're standing right now has so much potential. And all because you didn't experience it right now or up until this point does not mean that it's out of reach for the future.
I love that so much. Is there anything else that you would tell to someone who is feeling like they're broken or their body's broken or asking themselves, like, why am I like this? Anything you would want those women to know?
Yeah. So this is something that I'm even practicing right now because something that I shared with you, Steph, before we started recording, it's something that's really been prevalent in this season of my life right now is there's really no point in which you have arrived.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something to like move towards when it comes to health and personal development and business achievement. Like put any kind of subject line. And if you're a high achieving woman, you're moving towards it.
Right.
Right.
There's a goal or a destination that we want to achieve.
Yes. Yes. And that's a good thing.
Yes.
And oftentimes when we're on this journey, it could feel agonizing. And when I'm experiencing these times where gosh, you just feel like you're like, should it be this hard?
Mm.
Am I going in the right? Did I hear something wrong? And I thought I was good in this. Am I really that good? And you start doubting yourself. That's when when you start really doubting your skill or doubting yourself, focus on the next step. Don't need to do all the things. And especially if you're a mom, so often we are thinking about the whole day and what time to pick up our kids and what needs to be done after the children get home.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that is valid.
Yeah.
But in that moment, just feel where your feet are and take the next step.
The next best step.
The next best step.
Yes.
This is what I recommend to my clients when they're going through flare-ups. It has gotten me through flare-ups. When you feel like you're out of control, just focus on one thing at a time. And once you accomplish that, move on to the next. And you'll be surprised how productive you can be when you focus on one thing at a time.
I love that so much. I talk about that in a similar way because I'll have clients who they want to figure out A to Z. Like, I want to know Z before I move. And it's like,
Mhm.
you got to take one step and then B and C appear. And then you get to decide, do I want to go B? Do I want to go C? Do I want to go E? And then you take the next step. And
Mhm.
it's so funny. Just maybe 40, 50 minutes ago, I shared something in my stories that said, it has a little character at the bottom of a full flight of stairs. And it's like when you are feeling overwhelmed, and then it has another flight of stairs with the same character, it just circles one step. Focus on
Yeah.
this.
It's so good. I'm going to share it online too, because
Yeah.
it's so true. And
Yes.
it's so powerful in the moment. It makes so much sense when you're looking at an image of it. But
Yeah.
when you're in the moment and you choose it, it's so freeing.
Yes.
It really can be so freeing when you just you're like, okay, this is it. This is what
Yeah.
we're focusing on. And then you just let everything kind of melt away for just a moment. It doesn't have to be
Yes.
forever.
Right.
And it makes life just a little bit more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes what we need.
Yep. Rather than, okay, today, even though there's overwhelm, I'm not going to choose overwhelm. I'm not going to spiral. I'm just going to focus on that next best step and trust that everything will work out. Because when I look at my life, when you look at your life, when all of us look at our lives, how many things did we think were going to be awful, or had so much fear? Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And then when you look at it, it worked out okay, or sometimes better than you ever imagined.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes that one step can be like taking a shower.
Right. It doesn't have to be. Yeah. Make it easy.
It could be in your capacity. And so it doesn't
Thank you for saying that.
You're so welcome. Because that's it could be making yourself lunch. It could be stepping away from work. Because it is so true. I've experienced that personally, where you're just like, this is going the worst way possible. And you freak out. And then something happens. You're like, oh, that's nice. And then, you're like, wait, hold on. I just freaked out. And then you go into this point of reflection. And so often we have actually the choice to be like, you know what? What's this next step? Hey, what if everything goes right? And this is hard. Yes. And what if I choose to believe that everything goes right?
So. Love it. Love it. Okay. So if listeners are like, oh my gosh, I, want to follow you, connect with you, what is the best way that they can find you?
Yeah, of course. So you can find me on social media, TikTok, Instagram at autoimmune.babe, or you can find me on my website at autoimmunebabe.com. Oh, and I also have a podcast, the Road to Remission podcast, and there's episodes every Tuesday. So feel free to listen in if you want.
Love it. I'll link everything up in the show notes so you can just click that with ease and follow Gigi. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Steph. It's the best.